Assalamu alaikum, ladies. Alhamdulillah, I finally did it. I actually wrote a book. It's dedicated to all the single Muslim mothers out there, hence the name How to Be a Single Muslim Mum. Inshallah, it's available as an ebook, paperback, and it will be available as an audio. Alhamdulillah. Barakallahu feekum, sisters, for the support. Check out the link in the description to get yours. The Niqabi Diaries, Season 4. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode, season 4 of the Niqabi Diaries. Alhamdulillah, we have a sister with us today. She's going to introduce herself, inshallah, for the listener. Sister, please.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. My name is Fadilah. I am an Irish Nigerian Muslim. As for who I am and what I do, I'm a recent graduate. My background is law, specifically the area of human rights law. And yeah, recent graduate. I suppose I don't really have a career path given that I'm a recent graduate. So I am a writer. That is one thing that's definite. And that's me at the moment.
Okay, cool. Alhamdulillah. So could you give us a little bit of an introduction to about your religious background, inshallah?
Yeah, so my parents are Nigerian. Well, I am by extension, of course. My parents are Nigerian Yoruba. So most people are familiar with the ethnic group that is the Yoruba people of Southwest Nigeria, if my geography is not mistaken. So we come from a state called Oshun, and within that, a city called Iwo in particular. So my parents, Iwo is a pretty Muslim town. So my parents are both Muslim. They both came from that same town. And I was born and raised in Ireland. My parents are Muslim, their families are Muslim. But I mean, in terms of my religious upbringing, it wasn't like a particularly practicing household, I would say. We were sent to like Sunday school from the age of like 7 to 14, but Islam was kind of like a background secondary thing. Alhamdulillah, like, bit by bit, like our family and individuals in our family started to like, get practicing more, start eating halal in the house. Different people started wearing hijab, alhamdulillah, these sort of things, and, making more efforts to get closer to Allah. And then I suppose, family is one thing, but personally for me, at the age of about 14, no, yes, 15, I put on the hijab. And then a lot of the stuff actually came after that. So for me, it was a very much a cultural thing. Like I had seen a lot of stuff online about, your identity, who you are, where you come from, your roots. And, at that age, every teenager is trying to figure out who they are and like form an identity for themselves. And I was like, okay, this hijab is going to help me get closer to mine. Mind you, at the time, for me, it was very much just a head wrap, head cover, I didn't really understand hijab as like an inner and outer garment, something that adorns your soul and your character, and something that also like adorns your body in the fullest sense and not just covering your hair. But at the same time, it was a really good step in the right direction, alhamdulillah. And even though I started for reasons that aren't Islamic per se, it was really much more of an identity thing. You know, you just there was definitely a spiritual element in there, but it wasn't in the forefront. But alhamdulillah, Allah did take that and give it like greater purpose. So after that was when I started to actually look into the religion more, become more practicing, and really kind of start to, in my own personal opinion, make Islam a bigger part of my life. Alhamdulillah, of course, it's a journey that never ends. It wasn't just like a flip the switch moment and now I'm a perfect Muslim. But it was definitely a point of increased consciousness and actually deciding this is what Islam is going to mean to me in terms of embodying the Quran and Sunnah in my life. So I can't even remember the question, subhanAllah. I just kind of rumbled on there, but that was the hijab. So I suppose we'll get to the niqab bit in a bit.
Okay, mashallah. Yeah, you answered the question very well, alhamdulillah. Yeah, basically, can you tell us how did you start wearing the niqab? So like, how was your progression, and were there any kind of issues when you started wearing it within your family or culturally? Like, because obviously I definitely want to know about Islam in Ireland, because you're the first sister that I've spoken to who's actually living in Ireland. So that will be interesting as well. So if you let us know the kind of dynamics around that, inshallah.
Sure, yeah. Um, yeah, I suppose I'll say that the Muslim community in Ireland when I was growing up was small enough, but I live in Dublin, the capital, and I feel like every capital city always has the highest population of immigrants and diverse cultures and religions and that sort of thing. So I suppose we were like we definitely knew Muslims growing up. You know, we had local mosques, that sort of thing. But in terms of the niqab, I had never seen someone in real life wearing it, I don't think. But somehow, subhanAllah, since I was a kid, I always knew that I wanted to wear it. I remember I would go to in madrasa on the weekends and I would take my little pull-on hijab and I would like take it and cover my face with it, like the bottom half of my face with it, subhanAllah.
MashaAllah.
And I remember the teachers would be like, what are you doing? Are you trying to be a Saudi? Are you trying to be this? And I'm like, I don't know about Saudis. I don't know about any of this. I just know that this is really elegant. And
Mhm.
I really just, from a young age, I couldn't really explain why, you know? And even before I started wearing hijab, it was always an aspiration, you know? I didn't know how, I didn't know when, I didn't even know a single person who wore it, but I just knew somehow, some way, inshallah, I would end up wearing niqab. And this was even before, Islam had any real significance to me. There was just something about the way it looked. Maybe I saw it on TV, maybe it was the way women carried themselves that I had seen somewhere in the media, but it just really like it always had a place in my heart from the very beginning. And it was very inexplicable, subhanAllah. But yeah, in terms of my actual journey, alhamdulillah, I think I'm really grateful when I look back on it, alhamdulillah. So following on from my feminist days and my kind of Afrocentric identity and all this kind of stuff in secondary school. Second I put on the hijab, I really, really enjoyed it. I felt that like I really flourished at everything, because for me it was a really big moment of, this is who I am, taking me for what I have to say and, my opinion, not for how I look. I felt like it was a very strong statement.
Mhm.
So from like 15, 16 onwards, I was just like, anything reading. I was in the youth event. I was like public speaking and just, excelling at my studies. Alhamdulillah, it was a really good time in my life. And then the whole time I was just learning, 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 learning. And I didn't really have any social media at the time. So I remember there were a couple of Niqabi YouTubers like Bint Athens who I really found her content really engaging.
Mhm.
But it was just really, I really, I think that it's a time of youth that not a lot of people get to have. I think Alhamdulillah, because Allah has given me a confident personality, it's just this like hyper focused stage of youth. You just have the energy to learn about everything and
Yes,
anything. No one can
definitely.
tell you, no one can tell you
Yeah,
what to do. No one can tell, like
yeah.
you were just in your element. Um, yeah, I think it's a really beautiful time and a lot of growth takes place in that time, alhamdulillah. But anyway, I got to university. I started studying law in Trinity College, which is a pretty well known, it's the oldest university in Ireland.
Mhm.
It's kind of like an Irish extension of Oxford and Cambridge, but like
Oh,
not
okay.
not on the same level, but they were made around the same
Okay.
time. So it's pretty prestigious, I guess. So that brought a whole new world, university life, you don't really know what to expect. And though I grew up with Muslims around me because I live in Dublin, I actually went to secondary school outside of Dublin.
Right.
So in me, there weren't all that many Muslims. So I had decided that the second I got into university, wherever I went, I just needed to find the Islamic Society, the
Mhm.
MSA, Muslim Students Association, whatever it was. And I remember I walked into Trinity and it was Freshers Week. So they had all the different like tents for different societies. And I walked right up to the Muslim Students Association and I was like, this is what I came for, sign me up. And they were like, oh, okay. Like I literally said those exact words.
Mhm.
So I had made it like, you know, subhanAllah, you really look back in hindsight and you don't know, like, you could walk into Freshers Week and sign up for any society. You could have signed up for like sports or dancing or
Mhm.
the literary society or the feminist society. And I did sign up to other societies, but it's pure guidance from Allah that like I had the mindset of only, you know, centering myself around the Islamic society. And that was going to shape the rest of my college
Alhamdulillah.
years. Alhamdulillah, because you know the university scene yourself. Like you walk in and if you don't have any sense of direction, you're so easily swept along with the crowd.
Absolutely.
And before you know
Absolutely.
it, yeah, it's one ideology or another like haram activity or something
Mhm.
or the other. But So yeah, that was
I think,
me.
and
So I
when
got
I
into
joined
the
uni, I didn't even know, like, I was so ignorant towards everything about university, to be honest, because I never actually planned to go. I kind of accidentally ended up going to university. So even the whole Freshers Week, the concept of it, and the different societies, I didn't have a clue. And I was a brand new Muslim as well. So when I went there, I didn't know about these different societies and stuff. And I don't even think I really attended the Freshers Week, like pretty much, like, to
Mhm.
be honest. So it's like I missed out on joining Islamic society and stuff like that. And it was only later on, really, when I had started attending like lectures and stuff like that, that eventually I found out about the prayer room in the university and things like that. And alhamdulillah, my teacher had helped me to find that. So because actually for the beginning, I had been just going home and doing my prayer back at my student accommodation every time. And then
Mhm.
he was like, "Oh, don't you know they have like a Islamic prayer room or something?" SubhanAllah. So yeah, it's just like, yeah, when you don't know about certain things, it puts you at a disadvantage. But alhamdulillah, so yeah, it was quite interesting actually. It just reminded me of that, SubhanAllah.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Um, Yeah, and I think it's university is always an interesting time for Muslim students because we hear a lot of stuff about fitna. There's fitna everywhere, but university is like a whole new
Oh,
level, and
definitely.
you're at the perfect age to just be tempted and swayed, and but it can really, I think, from my experience, it can really go one of two ways.
Mhm.
You see people who came into university, no Muslim friends, knowing nothing about Islam, and subhanAllah, like the journeys that they go on are literally life-changing in terms of, getting closer to Allah and learning about the deen. But of course, it could very easily go the other way.
Mhm.
So I think this is my former Muslim Students Association chairperson personality coming out because I was always like very passionate about the fact that, as someone who's, leading a society or a student organization like that, you could really be the difference between someone's university experience. And you would pray that Allah would, be the means through which someone is guided, whether
Mhm.
that's a lecture or an event or whatever you hosted. Like it's really important to always try and be, you know, a means of guidance for someone by the permission of Allah. But I'm getting sidetracked. So yeah, I got into university. Um, First day of university, I was wearing jeans and a long top, and of course, like a headscarf.
Mhm.
Last day of university, I was walking out like I was in niqab and abaya, subhanallah. So there's a very big
MashaAllah.
switch that happened somewhere
MashaAllah.
along the way.
Alhamdulillah.
So it was yeah, first year, um, regular, really getting involved with the Muslim Students Association and really enjoying having Muslim friends properly for the first time in my life. But then at the same time, you know, growing up slightly distant from a Muslim community, one thing that I did notice is like when Muslims grow up around other Muslims, they tend to take it for granted.
Yes.
Um, and there's a lot of stuff that can kind of just be normalized or culture and stuff starts to seep in. And bear in mind, I was this person from the ages of like what 15 to 17 who was like trying to learn Islam, like, and I was learning it in its purest sense. To like, alhamdulillah, I was like, this is what the Quran says, this is what the Sunnah says. I'm not saying, I mean, it was the internet that I was using as my primary tool. So of course there was like, little bits of misinformation here and there, but for the most part, in my head, it was so simple. I'm like, okay, Islam says this, Allah and the messenger say that, and this is the effects of this, and these are the rewards, and this is how it's going to help you in this life and the next, and it's that simple. Whereas when you get to university, you see different people, and it's like, oh, Quran and Sunnah say this, but my culture says that, or like,
Mhm.
this is wrong, but everyone does it, and I've seen other Muslims do it, and there's a whole different like, there's positives and negatives to the
Yes.
community aspect, but alhamdulillah, it was something. So yeah, first year enjoying the MSA events, and then COVID happened, lockdown happened. So a good bit of first and second year took place online. And
Mhm.
at home, alhamdulillah, I was just, kind of really in my element, but it gives you so much time to think. And you've probably heard this before, but the face masks that we had to wear for COVID
Yes.
were
Yes.
like they were a big turning point for me
Mhm.
because I was like, could this be the moment that I finally become the Niqabi that I was, Because just having my face covered, um, that element of like privacy was something that I was really, really enjoying. And
Yes.
like I know a couple of other sisters, like, you know, the the restrictions were winding down and it wasn't obligatory to wear a face mask anymore. But some of the sisters would just keep it on. It's like, I kind of like this feeling. I know a good few sisters
Yes.
who are like, I like the feeling, I really
Mhm.
like the privacy. And then that there tends to be a pipeline from like face masks to niqab, alhamdulillah. So it's very
Alhamdulillah.
interesting. So yeah, I remember there were some sisters in the MSA. There's a really beautiful Algerian sister, Khadija. I remember anytime I would wear like a long skirt or anything, she would be like, "Oh, Allah Mubarak, mashallah, you look so beautiful, so elegant, so feminine." And I hadn't really given much thought to it, I wasn't consciously on a hijab journey. But like things like that, I was like, actually, I do feel really comfortable. I do feel really beautiful. And this does like it is easier for me to pray in this. I don't have to like,
Mm,
find something to wear on top. And I was like, okay,
yeah, practical.
that I wasn't consciously on a hijab journey.
Hmm.
I was like, I didn't neglect it, so to speak. But when something just isn't in your like conscience.
Yes. Yeah.
And I have a lot of opinions, a lot of things to share. So if, anything that would help me just be represented by my thoughts and personality and my character, the better. So yeah, the transition from like jeans to skirts and dresses was like a very natural one. I wasn't
Mhm.
like, oh, I only feel good in jeans, or I only feel attractive in jeans. Like I didn't care about any of that. So I was like, okay, this skirt thing could for me. So classes transformed to abaya. And I remember I had it on my Ramadan goals list one of the years when I had started to think about how practical and how modest, skirts and dresses were and that sort of thing, and looser clothing. I wrote on my Ramadan goals was that I wanted to start wearing abaya or something like that. And I
Mhm.
don't even remember, subhanAllah, I don't even remember the actual moment that my wardrobe just like shifted or when I actually reached that goal. But I just look back like years ago and I see the year that it was like what 2018 or 19 or something.
Mhm.
And I was like, I looked at my wardrobe and I looked at the list and I was like, SubhanAllah, when did this happen? I wrote it down, not even knowing how or when. Like I was on a student budget. I wasn't, exactly equipped to transform my whole wardrobe to
Yes,
these
exactly.
luxury, expensive
Mm.
abayas. And that's a big hindrance for a lot of sisters.
It is.
But
It was for
SubhanAllah,
me. Yeah.
yeah. Somehow you just look back and you're like slowly but surely, whether you had those awkward days of struggling to like try and make two not very compatible pieces work, and it's like a long shirt and a long skirt, and you're trying
Yeah.
to make it look somehow, but subhanAllah, it always comes together somehow with the like support of other sisters. But basically I went after COVID, I said I would study abroad for one semester in
Mhm.
Spain.
Mhm.
I chose to go to Andalusia, Granada in particular, because I was really into the Muslim Islamic history of Al-Andalus.
Mhm.
Um, and before I left, I ordered some niqabs online, and I ordered them to Dublin, of course, because that's where I live.
Mhm.
They didn't come. So I ended up going to Spain with no niqabs because my whole plan was, okay, I'm going to be away from my family, and I'm going to get into like the whole family reaction thing in a second. But I was like, okay, I'm going to be away from my family. This is a perfect time to like, see if this is for me. I already find it really comfortable. It's this strange, attraction in the back of my mind that I've never been able to explain my whole life. So we really need to test this out because it's clearly been put in my heart for a reason by Allah
Mhm.
subhanahu wa ta'ala. But, qadar Allah, I ended up going to Granada without any niqabs. So I was just, living my regular life. And then friends came to visit me because Granada is a beautiful holiday destination. So they came to
Yes.
visit me and they stayed, in my accommodation while I was there. Um, and one of the sisters came from the UK. We actually had both of the sisters had studied together with me in Trinity in Dublin. And one of the sisters came from the UK and she brought me a niqab. And one of them, subhanAllah, she had sewn for me by hand herself, which I thought like it's such a beautiful
MashaAllah.
gesture that I remember to this day. And I just tried it on. And I was waiting for like a very big moment. Like, oh, I look in the mirror and I'm like, who is this? Oh my gosh, I feel so something, something, something.
Yeah.
But that literally didn't happen. Like it felt so natural that I didn't
Yes.
even like, double take. And I was like, one part of me was like, the shaitan whispers and it's like, oh, it didn't feel magical. Maybe it isn't for you. But like that was just the tiniest voice. The
Mm.
biggest part of me was like, I don't even like there's nothing even to think twice about.
Subhanallah.
So subhanAllah, it was really that simple. So from there on, in Spain, away from my family, I started wearing the niqab like here and there, part-time to the mosque. Um, and then I came back to Ireland and I couldn't quite let it go. But at the same time, like, I felt like I had to give myself a whole new social introduction to all my friends and
Yeah.
family. Like, this is me, I wear niqab, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, okay, we're gonna keep it at part-time. So I kept it at part-time um for a while, and then eventually came out, so to speak. I mean, I don't like
SubhanAllah.
that phrase because it's associated with like,
Yeah, of
a
course.
different kind of group in society, but, you know, came out and told folks that I was, this is the only people I really cared about were my parents.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote them a letter because that's what I do when I have a hard time having difficult conversations. So I wrote them a letter and I told them, yeah, this is me, this is what I want to do. I've had like loads of practice because I knew that they would have, concerns.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So I had written in the letter all of the things that I had already thought through because I was, I was just on the ball. I was like, and I know, I've worn it, I've tested people's reactions, people still treat me with respect, people are still kind to me, people this and that. I know obviously not to go to certain areas at certain times, like I don't know. Alhamdulillah, Dublin is a pretty safe place, but obviously I'm not going to be walking the streets at like late at night or in the city center, that sort of thing, in case, people who have less than pure intentions are around, that sort of thing. So that was basically the actual journey. And I had made so much dua in the meantime, particularly when I was in the part-time phase. And with that, I suppose I'll just kind of go into my family's reaction and their kind of
Mhm.
background when it comes
Yes,
to
yes, of
the
course. Because I
niqab.
want to know what happened once they read that letter.
Ooh, that's where the drama kicks in because basically the whole part-time business was because I knew that they were going to feel some type of way.
Right.
During lockdown, I had my friend had gifted me. Then this is where it comes back to the whole, I don't have the budget. I'm just a student. Where am I going to
Mm-hmm.
get modest clothing? Literally, I had saved up to like buy my first jilbab. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, it was like 25 pounds or something. And I was ordering it from the UK. And because, it was that was a significant amount to me at the time,
Yeah, of
given
course,
my
as a
student
student.
budget.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I had actually just all I did was I took a picture and I was like, if I'm going to drop this money, I need to be sure that I'm going to get the color that suits me. So I
Mm-hmm.
took a picture and I sent it to my friend and I was like, which color do you think is nicest on this website? And she was like, oh, don't buy one. My sister has one that she can give you. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, what? SubhanAllah. Like that saved me, so much at the time.
Yes.
And she was like, yeah, you should get the one that my sister has, see your parents' reaction, see how you like it, see if it suits you, et cetera, before you go spending money on it. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, Allah really is opening a door for me in this sense. So yeah, she sent the jilbab in the mail. It was this beautiful, like burgundy kind of color.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried it on, and that was such a beautiful day. SubhanAllah. I recorded a video that I still have. And I just felt like, I was just cloaked. I think I wrote a poem about it that day as well because I just felt like just so safe and beautiful. I felt like a princess. It was just a beautiful
Alhamdulillah.
feeling. Alhamdulillah, it was beautiful. So I went downstairs. I was buzzed. I was like to my parents, look what I got. And they were not impressed. They were
SubhanAllah.
like, they were like, what is this? It has no shape. It looks like a bin bag. And
SubhanAllah.
it was just not the most positive reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And I was pretty disheartened by that. Um, so I kind of knew how they felt. They were, there's a lot of people who are of the opinion, there's different ways to be modest. You don't have to dress like this, you don't have to dress like that. Modesty can look like this and that. And to some extent, of course, as long as you're fulfilling the conditions of the hijab, yes, there are different ways to actually, physically, dress. But that doesn't mean that sisters who want to kind of go above and beyond. I don't even know if it can be considered above and beyond because at the same
Exactly.
time, the
I think
conditions of
it's
the
just
hijab are set.
but that's the thing. Like, I think, like, I can definitely identify with that because even for me, I remember, like, going from these different stages, one stage to the next. And it's just like you see that, oh, yeah, the concept of modesty is like what really is people's concept of modesty is going to vary, obviously. But, when it comes to, like, I remember when I started wearing the abaya, for example, and I was so happy because I thought this is so practical because I don't have
Hmm.
to think about what I need to wear when I go outside to cover what I need to cover. And, just
Yeah.
having that one piece something to just put on. And it's like, I was worried about my parents' reaction. What would they think me dressing this kind of way? But at the same time, I felt like, oh, well, I don't really care because it looks good for me. And I'm doing what I need to be doing, which is covering. But then even with some abayas, there's such variety, I think, with the abayas,
Hmm.
and how they look, depending on what type you get, the type of fabric as well that it is. Some of them can be, you know, a little less modest than others in some ways, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Some of, depending on the material, some of them can maybe cling to parts of your body at times and stuff like that. Can be, like, especially when it comes to the you get these like jersey made ones, and those are
Yeah.
really nice, but like, sometimes the jersey just kind of like, clings onto your body like at random times, like when you're walking or
Hmm.
something, revealing like part of your shape, which, with other fabrics it's less so. So obviously, like, when you become conscious, more and more conscious of these things, when you're, going out about your daily business, you start like thinking about this, like, oh, look, like, I didn't like maybe when I was walking, and it kind of just got stuck to my leg here, or my thigh was kind of, quite visible, the shape of my thigh, for example. Then you start thinking about, oh, well, maybe I need to change, to a different type of fabric, clothes or something like that. Do you know what I mean? And obviously, like, when you're on a budget, these things, have a factor to play as well, like with what you can actually do. But
Yeah.
and I think when my first time went, the jilbab especially, like, I really liked it, because I just thought, oh, this is
Hmm.
fantastic. You just feel like, yeah, like, khalas, like, that is it. Everything is just like, even,
All covered all in one. Yeah.
yeah, like, you really, you feel like, and the thing is, I think if I had done that in the beginning, I might have felt overwhelmed, and it was too much for me, like
Hmm.
coming out of jeans, for example. Because I mean, when you talked about going to university wearing jeans and stuff, the same outfit you had, that was literally what I was wearing. So I think if I'd gone from there to wearing jilbab in the beginning, I probably would have felt like, oh, this is too much. Because even wearing the jilbab itself, even though it felt fantastic, I felt even at the time that it was just a lot of fabric. Like, you need to get used to wearing so much fabric, like, practically, when you're going around and doing different things,
Hmm.
especially for me personally, and with the like my daily lifestyle. I felt just getting in and out of the car with so much fabric was just like, oh, like, I had to think a lot more than when I was wearing my
Yeah.
abaya, for example. Do you know what I mean? Because it's just like,
Hmm.
oh, I can't manage this. It's like, oh, there's too much fabric here, kind of thing. But eventually, alhamdulillah, just, it's become like something second nature to me now. So you know how to deal with the actual clothes that you're wearing. And, I think, a lot of the time we don't really talk about the practical side of these things, but there's the element
Definitely.
of comfort, comfort in the sense of being, you feel that you're being as modest as you can be, so you've got that
Hmm.
kind of comfort in your mind mentally. But then there's the practical side of it as well, which is obviously, as
Hmm.
I said, maneuvering just your day-to-day business, without like tripping over, for example, or
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
you're praying your salah, for example, like, when the fabric is getting folded, and maybe you'll kneel on the wrong part of your skirt, of the jilbab,
Yeah.
it's going to get stuck.
Yeah.
All these different kind of little things that you kind of need to learn to adjust to. We don't really talk about that much, but it is something which obviously each of us has to kind of deal with. So it's good to kind of highlight these things, I think, subhanallah. So I'm sorry for interrupting your
No, not at all.
what you were
I think
saying,
it's
but it
also,
just reminded me of so many things, subhanallah.
yeah, yeah. I think, I suppose we're gonna get to the actual like advice and stuff
Mm,
for sisters who are thinking of wearing the niqab. But I think yes, it's not just a whole religious thing, to put it very bluntly. I think it's not just, oh, your iman is this level and then you start dressing like this
yeah,
because it's like X equals Y.
yeah.
Like you said, there's so many different things to consider. And I think, clothing is such a big part of who we are and how we present ourselves to the world. So you're literally, having to come to terms with this new identity of how the world sees you kind of
Mm,
thing. And the practical side of it, the personal side of it. So inshallah I'll get to all of that because I actually think it is very, very important in the whole journey. Um, so yeah, back to the my
parents'
first job
reaction.
back. Yeah, it was pretty disheartening, and I didn't really know what to do because, alhamdulillah, my parents and I have had a pretty good relationship, and the idea of like disappointing them in any way
Mm,
was just, it was hard because um I wasn't a perfect kid. Like I had my fair share of mischief, but the idea of like actually like clashing heads with them on something, because I had a pretty, in my adolescence, I wasn't like a wild child or anything,
Yeah.
so I didn't upset them or disappoint them in that sense.
Hmm.
So it was my first time actually having to come to terms with this idea of like they actually dislike something that I'm doing,
Hmm.
but to me, it's something that I like, it's very close to my heart. It's something that I really resonate with. And I like, how are we going to come to terms with these two things? So that was a whole journey. Basically, it culminated in the whole part-time stage of me going outside in jilbab, going outside in niqab,
Hmm.
different things at different times, and basically just taking it all off the second I got in the front door.
Wow.
I went to, because I live in Dublin, I went to university in Dublin. It was basically every day I came home and I would just take everything off before I went upstairs, and I just
Hmm.
have like my underclothes underneath.
Hmm.
Um, and like they obviously knew that I didn't go out in like the jeans and like, cami that I was wearing underneath, but
Hmm.
didn't know what exactly I had put on top. And that was fine for me. I feel, that buffer time was also good in terms of actually building confidence and being able to like stand firm in my decision. I'm conscious that I'm not a great storyteller. I always jump from like bit to bit.
Oh no, no, no! It's fantastic. No, do you know what it's like? Because it's the details that matter. Do you know what I mean? I think
Yeah,
that's this
yeah.
is nice. I wanted to ask that. So when you started wearing the abaya, did you start wearing the niqab with it as well? Like, was you doing the same kind of thing, like all together, or was it kind of one and
No.
then the
Yeah,
other?
no, that's
Mm.
no, it was one thing then the other. So it was kind of like college days. Like first year was I just came in. Second year, I was mostly at home because of COVID.
Yeah.
Then third year I went away and I was kind of dressing how I wanted. It was a
Mhm.
combination of everything, just general loose clothes, alhamdulillah, like skirts, abayas, that sort of thing. And I didn't really have like a strict, like I am an abaya
Yeah.
wearer, I am a
Yeah.
jilbab wearer. I was just, I'm wearing my hijab in the fullest sense every day,
Yeah.
and that's what matters. My
Hmm.
wardrobe wasn't uniform, so to speak.
Yeah.
Then I came back for the second semester, and the abaya and like long dresses and that sort of thing were pretty like staple in my wardrobe.
Hmm.
And it was that point that I kind of just like got rid of trousers altogether. Even though the trousers I had left were loose, it
Yeah.
was like it was just I was like, nah, this doesn't really feel like me anymore. So I just kind of moved on from them. And it was
Hmm.
pretty much like solid abayas and dresses at that point. Um, and like in the summers as well, outside of college, because I use college years, like academic years as my kind of reference point. But
Yes.
also in the summers, like I was pretty like known, like it was known that if I was going out, it was going to be a long dress or an abaya kind of thing. And then coming back from Spain was when this was third year of college, second half in the second
Hmm.
semester. So
Hmm.
that was when I started kind of wearing the abaya, the niqab part time,
Hmm.
as well as like the abaya and jilbab occasionally. Um, so I suppose yeah, that was it. And then it was really fourth year and like the end of third year, the summer of third year, and then going into final year where everything like I was like, okay, this niqab thing is really like every time I have to wear it part time and stuff like that, I would just really wish. And at that time, like I said, I was making a lot of dua that Allah would make it easy for me somehow. And because it was part time, I was comfortable with it being part time as well. Like I was still taking steps in my own way. Um, and some people would, the funny thing, I don't know if you wore the niqab part-time as well or wore anything part-time, but it's funny because you only ever meet some people and you always seem to be wearing it. And then you
Yeah.
only ever meet some people and you're not wearing it at all.
Yeah.
And even within like the same period when you're not fully wearing it, you're not fully not wearing it. Some people would be like, "Oh yeah, I know her. She's in a Niqabi," and other people would be like, "No, she's not. Every time I've seen her, she's not wearing it." But that's just pure chance because
SubhanAllah.
of how subhanAllah. And that as well, I was like, I'm not trying to have like a split identity type
Yes.
thing, or
Yeah.
people would be like, "What's going on here?" Like, it was never really about people, but just for me and myself, I just was like, let's finalize some things. Let's just call it what it is. Let's commit, because it wasn't I wasn't feeling held back, in
Hmm.
any sense. It was all just about the social transition and most importantly my parents' transition.
How did your parents get used to this, or if they have gotten used to it?
Yeah, so I knew that there was going to be drama, like I said.
Hmm.
My mom, I remember one time, there's not many Niqabis in Ireland. But again, if there are, they're mostly in Dublin. Uh,
Hmm.
so anyway, I remember one time my mother and I were driving, well, she was driving, I was in the passenger seat, and we were going to drop my sister at madrasa or something. and someone drove past us, and it was a Niqabi. She was in like a full black veil. And
Mm.
I just remember my mom's reaction that day. And she was like, I can't believe that people are even allowed to drive in this. You can't see their identity. This is so dangerous. And I was like, well, not really, first of all, because why would you don't need to see people's faces when they're driving, first of all.
Exactly.
And second, why is this dangerous? Like her vision isn't obscured. You can literally see her eyes. She can see out and this sort of thing. But it wasn't about the driving and it wasn't about the safety, but it was just about an aversion to, people who dress that way in
Hmm.
society.
Hmm.
Um, and I remember another instance, we were going on a walk, my mom, my sisters, and I, and like I remember, I don't know what the conversation was at all, but it was my sister was saying, oh, and what if Fadilah starts to wear the niqab or something? What if she starts to wear the face veil? And my mom was like, oh no, she would never do that. And I just remember
SubhanAllah.
being like, yes, I would. Yes, I would, subhanAllah. But I didn't say it out loud at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it was these small things that I had picked up bit by bit that I was like, this is not gonna go down so easily, maybe.
Hmm.
Like there's a lot of kind of prejudice going on.
Hmm.
One of my dad's sisters is a niqabi. And he would say like,
All
oh,
right.
yeah, yeah. And we hadn't really met her because we didn't go to Nigeria all that often. Like we
Right.
went, there was a big gap basically. Um, so I remember he would say it kind of in passing, and because we didn't really, again, like it's a diaspora thing. So it's like, oh, you have an uncle here, you have an uncle there, you
Yeah,
have one
yeah.
auntie, she's a businesswoman, she wears the veil. And I was like, oh, she wears the veil. But like, it wasn't exactly something that I could like pick up on and be like, oh my gosh, tell me more about the veil and this and that. Because
Hmm.
like, again, it wasn't popular among my parents. And I suppose for context, like Nigerian or West African Muslims, you know, um, there are certain perceptions about, you can't generalize, absolutely not, but
Hmm.
there are certain perceptions of more practicing people. I suppose, actually, to be fair, this is in many, many cultures.
Yes, of course.
If and where niqab is not the average, it is seen as unnecessary. It's seen as
Mm.
over the top. It's seen as, and I guess Yoruba Muslims, me and my friends would kind of joke about like anything above the bare minimum is seen as extreme.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah, people are very happy with like, the turban style and, traditional clothes where they don't have to like, alter them to be hijab friendly and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
And of course, there are many sisters and women that do. But it's not like a cultural priority, so to speak. And
Hmm.
while, Nigerian Muslims are very, very religious, Nigeria as a whole is a very practicing country, both Christian and Muslim,
Yeah.
but it's different levels all the time. So that was the story. And I knew that it was going to be a bit of a struggle. And that's why I was making dua from the jump. I was like, I need as much, divine support in this as possible. SubhanAllah, nothing is easy unless Allah makes it easy.
Of
And I was
course.
like, I know my parents have a lot of prejudice against this. They think it's kind of antisocial. They think it's all this and that. So there's a lot of barriers that I knew I had to break down. So basically, it came to the point I had been wearing the niqab part-time for some time, and I was like, let's just rip the plaster off and let them know.
Hmm.
So I let them know. I wrote a letter. I printed it on some nice paper. It was the whole thing, and I left it in their room. And yeah, they read it, and I didn't know they had read it. So like a couple of days passed, and I was like, oh, maybe they didn't even like, maybe they just read it and forgot about it or whatever. So
Mm.
didn't think much. Next thing, a couple of days later, I was called into the living room, and it was a very serious chat. My mom and my dad sat me down, and they were like, okay, we read your letter. And surprisingly, they were like, oh, this is a good thing, definitely not a bad thing. You know, alhamdulillah, like my parents are very, very reasonable people. And they're like, even if this isn't something we would do ourselves, even if this isn't something that, we think is necessary, we can definitely see that, okay, I remember I emphasized a lot in the religion in the letter that it was something that was part of the religion
Yes.
because I knew that that was a big contention. Like, oh, it's
Yes.
just a Saudi thing, it's just an Arab thing, et cetera, et
Mm.
cetera. So I emphasized that a lot. So they were like, okay. I remember my dad started with, this is a good thing. No one can say it's a bad thing for sure. It's good that
Alhamdulillah.
you feel
Alhamdulillah.
this level of modesty and you want to get close to God. But, and then after the but, everything, started um all of these different like reasons that like it's not a good idea. You haven't graduated. How are you going to find a job? You're
Mm,
single. How are you going to all of these things is going to put people off in one way. It's going to put people off in another. And then one thing that really stood out to me that like I was really taken aback by was that I have a friend who had I had helped her take her shahada basically, and I know her from when she was non-Muslim, and through the journey of getting to know Islam, and alhamdulillah we took shahada together for her.
alhamdulillah.
Um, alhamdulillah, and I remember one thing that my parents said was like, oh, and your friend, um, you know, you were only able to give her dawah, you were only able to help her in this way and that way because she saw you as approachable. And
Mm,
even they said the specific thing was like, even if you don't tell someone when you're telling them about Islam, even if you don't tell them, oh, you have to dress like me, you have to wear a veil, this and that, they're going to just assume that Islam is very difficult and really,
mm,
you have to be like this or you don't bother at all. I remember I was thinking that was the only thing in the whole conversation. Everything else I could kind of just bat away. I could just brush it
mhm,
off. I was like, yeah, I know people can still be nice to me. I know I still have a voice. I know this, I know
mhm,
that. That was all fine. I didn't really like let that get to me too much. But
mhm,
it was the dawah point that I was like, oh, snap. Like, what if it's true?
mm,
What if the niqab is a barrier to dawah? What if people do think that Islam is extreme? What if people this? What if people that? And I really had to sit with that for a while. But like at the end of the little like family meeting, they were like, okay, we're not going to stop you. You're an adult. I think I was 20 or at the time.
okay.
Um, I'm only, I'm only 21 now, so
Mhm,
um, alhamdulillah. But yeah, I remember that was the one thing. The conversation ended, but that was the one thing I'm like, okay, if I'm going to wear this, I need to be confident that it's not going to impede dawah and like it's not going to turn people away from Islam. Because you do hear these arguments and they're valid, to some extent, where it's
mm,
like, you do have to consider the society you live in when you wear niqab. I don't take the niqab as wajib.
mhm,
I just think, it's an extra deed, a sunnah that is very rewardable. But different scholars would say, you have to see the society you live in, how people respond, this and that. And I was like, okay, I really have to think about this. And then I thought about it and I was like, wait a minute, this makes no sense.
right.
Because arguably, if you go to any culture, you could say wearing the hijab is too extreme.
Exactly.
You can only give dawah if you look exactly like the people who you're giving
Exactly.
dawah to. You can only, oh, the
Exactly.
abaya will put people off. Oh, this will put people off. Or
Mhm.
having a mosque will put people off. You have to give dawah in a community set. Like
Exactly. You're
you
gonna
could go
always find
backwards for
out find
ages.
different excuses. And subhanAllah, like I just sorry to interject there, but I just wanted to
No,
say
go
actually,
ahead.
like there's a sister that I did speak to, I think it was season two or two or
Hmm.
three, I can't remember, but she was wearing the niqab, and actually because of that, through that, she met somebody who was a non-Muslim, and they was interested in Islam because of her just wearing the niqab. They was curious about it, and subhanAllah, the person became a Muslim through that. So she actually gave dawah with her niqab, and there's many examples of sisters being given the opportunity to give dawah. I mean, the niqab itself isn't a barrier to the dawah at all, because it actually piques a lot of people's curiosity, and you don't know
Yeah.
what's in the heart or mind of anybody that you meet, especially
Hmm.
with non-Muslims, even obviously Muslims themselves. But we have to remember as well, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who guides. Do you know what I mean? And us trying to dilute our religion, or kind of tiptoe around people in order to give dawah, is actually like, it doesn't make any sense, because we're not, portraying Islam as we should be or could be portraying it, because with the excuse that we're trying to, give dawah, it's like contradictory,
Yeah.
isn't it?
SubhanAllah, it really is. And the more I thought about it, I was like, it really is contradictory because the idea that you're gonna look and live and act and talk exactly like a non-Muslim in order to be relatable to them so that they can connect with Islam. At that point, what would the difference be, you know?
Exactly.
And I know, it's this whole thing like, oh, Islam has to enter the heart first and then this and that. But no, realistically, at the end of the day, if it's like, oh, being a Muslim looks exactly the same as like the way I already live,
Exactly.
or,
Then what's
there's
the
nothing
appeal
different
then?
about it. Exactly what is the point? And I think it's that is like a very much I don't know, I don't want to say maybe apologetic kind of way of thinking, or again, like it is just kind of diluting the religion, because if you go backwards and boil it down to the basics, it's this idea that like you just have to erase your Islam to the point of people's comfort, and then they'll accept it. And you know something very funny as well is that like if people are going to be averse to you, they're going to be averse to you. People dislike people for no reason, you know?
Exactly.
The idea that taking off one piece or another of Islamic clothing is going to make you more likable is pure, it's just delusional, to be honest. I remember it's very funny, the things that I said to myself internally at each stage. I remember when I was deciding to wear the hijab in secondary school, when I was going like when I was 15 or so. I was saying to myself, well, I'm black and I'm already black in a majority white country. So there's nothing I can get for wearing hijab that I haven't already got for being black. And I say this, I'm not like, I haven't been
Exactly.
exposed to very hateful incidents, but
Mm-hmm.
the idea is like, okay, I'm already different somehow.
Exactly.
And, you know, it can't be much worse. And then I was like, I said the exact same thing to myself when I was deciding to wear the niqab. I was like, well, I've already worn the hijab. I already wear, you know, these loose, long clothes and I already look different. So, like, you know, what different look, I can't get anything from wearing the niqab that I haven't already got from wearing the hijab, you know?
Mm-hmm.
SubhanAllah. And I think we also overstate how much people pay attention to us. I
Yes.
know like for many sisters, the abaya to the jilbab transition is very dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
But I think about it and I'm like, you know, if you already, you know, are wearing this long robe and you're walking through like the city center, no one's gonna be like, oh, the fabric from this robe connects from her head to her shoulder, and that's
Mm-hmm.
why it looks different. Like, you know, the difference between the abaya and the jilbab does not really matter to the
Mm-hmm.
average non-Muslim. They don't really
Exactly.
care all that much. SubhanAllah. So I think, yeah, there's this element of maybe overstating the differences that are going to happen. I think moving on from that, so basically my parents were like, you can do what you want to do. They kind of made clear that they didn't like it all that much, but it was calm. And then we moved on a little bit and they were kind of fine with it in theory.
Mm-hmm.
Then in practice, it was not so smooth because, you know, it was fine. And my mom had kind of had an idea before that. She had kind of like picked up here and there. And, you know, I wasn't exactly like being really, really slick about the whole like taking off my clothes when I got home thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, there were times, and, you know, mothers and daughters have that connection, alhamdulillah. So, you know, they weren't so happy with it, but it was all right-ish, I guess.
Yeah.
Then there actually came the times when they would like see me. Like I remember one time my dad came home early from work or something, and I was just about to leave for college, for university. And he saw me, you know, wearing my niqab, and I was about to leave. And, you know, it wasn't like a happy face, to say the
Mm-hmm.
least. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like he's a very, again, like a very, Allah Mubarak, like a very reasonable, patient man.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, you could tell like as a kid I had always been his princess, but now his princess was doing something very alien,
Yes.
and you know,
Yes.
I it was just like, this is too much, you know, you're very pretty, you know, you dress so cute, you know, you're very approachable, this and that. And it's like, why would you cover your face? So those kind of moments where like, oh, I would have to get into the car and my dad was there and it was like and we would still talk, but the conversation wouldn't flow the same as normal.
Yeah.
And I could just tell
Yeah.
that there were like slight grudges, you know,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. And it was like, then we had another conversation, which I really wasn't expecting.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was like, okay, we had this conversation, we talked it through, they know what this is about, and they had said it was fine. Then, you know, the more that they saw it, well, my dad in particular was like, okay, we need to talk about this again. And he had new arguments. He was like, okay, I need to talk about the way you dress because you know at this point that I don't like it. And you know at this point that I think this and I think that. And you know, I've actually gone and done my research and I asked some scholar friends and they said that it is a Saudi thing. And I was like, not quite.
Right. SubhanAllah.
I was like, you know, and he came with these new arguments, and I was like, listen, you know, there was nothing new to be said, subhanAllah.
Mm-hmm.
It's just this idea like, you know, many times people accept things in theory. And I have friends, for example, who become Muslim and their parents are like, okay, you know, she's Muslim and it's fine in theory. But then when they actually see, oh, she's praying now, or
Yeah.
she's starting to dress like this, and, you know, that's when it starts to be like, oh, wait, you're actually being serious, or this
Exactly.
is what it actually is going to mean in reality. So, that conversation had to happen the way it happened. You know, it was a passionate one from both sides, and at the end of the day it was like, I will accept his concerns, I will accept, you know, his worries and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, between me and Allah and between me and what feels best to myself and what feels most true, you know, I have to stick with what I know is right for me. And you know, it doesn't help on his part that he and my mom had always taught me this thing of like, it doesn't matter what people think. All it matters is that you're doing the right thing. You know, you're doing the right thing.
Exactly.
You should always be
Subhanallah.
confident in your decisions. And I was
Yeah.
like, Dad, weren't you the one who told me this?
Hmm.
And he was like, dang. SubhanAllah. But yeah, that was that. And basically ever since then, it's like, okay, this is it. This is reality, you know. And alhamdulillah, I think we just had to get over that initial part, and it's gotten much, much, much better since then. Like we go out together,
Alhamdulillah.
you know, my mom was like, at the beginning, it was kind of like, oh, you can't go out with me when you're dressed like this, or, you
Mm-hmm.
know, I'm going to be upset if I see you like this. And at the end of the day, it's like, you just need to get used to it. And I was speaking with one of the a sheikh's wife, and you know she was, you know, we were talking about it basically, and she was saying that what matters most is that you're a good kid.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you know, when you're making these decisions that may seem strange or may seem alien, as long as your character is what still shines through and your parents still know that they have the daughter that they once had, and you don't give them like grief in any way,
Hmm.
um they're going to get used to it. They're going to accept it eventually. And alhamdulillah, that's the case. Like now we're going out as a family and it's just a given. Like, or even when we're taking family pictures, you know, my mom would be like, oh, we're gonna we take our ones like regularly and then be like, oh, this one, maybe she's gonna send it to one of our family members. And you know, if it's a Nigerian thing. So it's like even
Yeah.
if she does
Yeah.
send it to like her brother, it
Hmm.
may end up somewhere else. So she'd be like, oh, do you
Exactly.
want to cover your face? Or she even says it funny. She's like, oh, do you want to cover your nose?
Yeah.
So it's like
Subhanallah.
it's a thing of like small bits of like acceptance, alhamdulillah, you know. And now it's like, oh, as long as your clothes are matching, like it's this whole thing of like, okay, this is you, but that doesn't mean you can let yourself go, kind of thing. You have to
Hmm.
still, you know, be presentable, this and that. So alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, like
Alhamdulillah.
the du'as were so fervent, you know, like I was really like, Allah needs to make this easy for me because there's no way you can't go from, you know, my mom who was literally just like outraged at the idea of just seeing a woman in niqab behind the wheel
Yeah.
to her now, her own daughter being a niqabi and like, you
Alhamdulillah.
know, her actually supporting that and reminding me, oh, are you going to go outside? Like, you know,
Yes.
Mm.
this kind of thing, stuff like that. SubhanAllah, it's really only by the help of Allah and, you know, trying to, you know, do your bit and stand your ground. And, um, yeah, and I think the consideration is also important. I think if I had just been really, really headstrong about it and been like,
Mhm.
this is me, I don't care what you say, this and that. Like I'm very glad that I chose to do it in the way that I did, where it's like, I
Alhamdulillah.
see your concerns, I understand your aversions, I understand that this is strange and new to you. So I'm going to do everything I can without selling out on my own values, but I am going to try and make this something that you can understand. And I'm going to try and take you along with me on the journey. Because at the end of the day, like, you know, that's how hearts are reached. That's how you give da'wah. You
Exactly.
can't, especially
Exactly.
when I know sisters who come from non-Muslim backgrounds would know this especially well, you know. Sometimes, you know, we get carried away in the zeal of like, I'm doing this for Allah. This is the right thing.
Mhm.
This is Quran and Sunnah. I don't care what people think. And that's very important to some degree. You have to be firm in your beliefs, but at the same time, you need to have that understanding. You know how as the Prophet ﷺ is told in the Quran, like, you know, it's only because you're gentle with them that they're still around you. Like if you had been harsh with them, they would have fled from around you, you know?
Exactly.
I think that that's so important. And there's always a balance, you know, and it's not exactly an easy journey. I know different sisters, you know, have different stories for sure. You know, for me, actually, the fabric itself was like that was nothing. That felt so natural. That came
Mhm.
so easy, alhamdulillah. But it was the social part. For other people, it's like, oh, I know this is the right thing to do, but you know, other reasons, and maybe their family is encouraging, and you know, it's different for everyone, subhanallah. But
Exactly.
that's how it was for me.
Alhamdulillah. So, okay. So, alhamdulillah. So it seems that obviously the biggest issue that you had, or at least from what I can see, is the one with your family. Those were the people you was obviously worried mostly about, which is natural. And I think definitely there's a lot of young sisters who go through this exact same thing as well. I do get sisters, mashallah, reaching out to me and having similar concerns to like, how you've experienced. So I think inshallah, this will definitely benefit them, especially the method that you took as well is really, mashallah, respectful and considerate. So Allahumma barik. But what
Oh, you
about
know,
in
one thing
the
as well, subhanAllah. Sorry, I'll just jump in.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I listened to a lot of the Niqabi diaries.
Okay,
SubhanAllah,
alhamdulillah.
it really came full circle because I remember I would just listen to these stories. And it's funny as well because like, you know, I don't want to say the niqab is like an arbitrary unifier, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, the people who wear blue jeans diaries or the people
Yeah,
who
yeah.
wear, I don't know. But it is
Subhanallah.
like when you actually do listen to it, it's like these sisters are from such different backgrounds
Mm-hmm.
and like such different stories. And what does unify them is the niqab, but at the same time, they're all their own people. They all have their own histories and this and that. And it was just very, very empowering. And I was just like, every
Alhamdulillah.
single episode I would listen to, I'd just be like, the strength, the courage,
Yes,
the soul and the
alhamdulillah.
character of these sisters, Allah Mubarak, like it was so inspirational. So stuff
Alhamdulillah.
like that, you know, I found was very, very impactful in the journey. Especially
Alhamdulillah.
like I would have these like random bouts of inspiration. Um, like I said, like the country, the town that I come from in Nigeria is a pretty religious one. I remember I saw more niqabis per capita than I had ever seen anywhere else
Mm,
in my life. I'd never been to Saudi, by the way. I have never been. But I was like, oh my gosh. I asked my parents and I was like, this was before I was wearing niqab. And it was I was like 17 or something.
mm-hmm.
And I was like, why there's so many niqabis here? What? And I was like really excited. And they're like, oh yeah, this is they were telling me a bit about Iwo's history and stuff. And I remember I had read up on it afterwards. But basically it's actually called the land of the scholars. In
Wow.
Yoruba, it's called
Subhanallah.
Ilu Afa. Yeah. So it's like it was actually one of like the centers for learning of
Mm,
Islamic knowledge, like in pre-colonial times before kind of like, you know, British imposed education was
mm-hmm.
the norm. And I found that so, so interesting. And I think that it's also like something very fascinating when, you know, we have these conversations about, oh, it's the Saudi thing, it's this and that. I'm like, well, literally look at your own country, like the own place where
Exactly.
you come from. And I think I've seen this like I don't know if you've seen those pictures that kind of float around. Like I saw a picture from Bosnia,
Mm,
that's like Eastern Europe in the 20s, and
mm-hmm.
the women were in like full black veils and stuff. And I
Yes,
was like,
exactly.
you know, that's that's the history, that's the Islamic
Exactly.
legacy
And
of
you
different
see the
places.
difference now. And it's just like subhanAllah, when people are trying to return to that, it's amazing how quickly human beings forget their own history culturally,
Hmm.
do you know what I mean? Like it, and you can see that across the board when it comes to Muslim countries and societies in general, when especially when we have these issues of when I talk to sisters from different backgrounds and they talk about their cultural histories, especially like when there's so much opposition to it now in the present time, when they go back just like less than 100 years, it was something which was the norm. Maybe their grandparents or the grandmothers was wearing the niqab, for example, all
Hmm.
these kind of things. But it's just like all of a sudden now it's just like people forget that actually this was part of your culture already. It was something normal.
Yeah.
The women were functioning in the society, they were contributing. It didn't act as
Hmm.
a restriction for them. It was something that was honorable for them to do.
Yeah.
And it was something that wearing less clothes in fact was something that was what actually was imposed on them, in
Hmm.
many instances, from the when
Yeah,
especially when it
subhanallah.
comes to African countries. Like it was something the
Yeah.
colonialists had imposed on, especially when you look at a country like Algeria, for example, that the women were stripped naked, subhanallah, they wanted to degrade them because they wanted them to be like as their slaves. So they saw that the Muslim women were fully covered, and they wanted to destroy that, they wanted to destroy the Muslim family and the honor and everything. So we need to
Hmm.
remember, like, there's so-called freedom that people that the modern day Muslim may feel that they're experiencing because they're dressing in a more Western way isn't freedom. Actually, that was what was imposed on you. you know
Hmm.
so on that note, I wanted to ask you as well about your wider community. Did you feel that the niqab itself was a barrier at all? You started to wear it while you was at university. Were there any issues there? Did you face any kind of abuse of any kind or anything like that?
Hmm. I'm gonna jump back to the point about culture there, just because I think it's super interesting and it's something I think a lot about, and then I'll go to the point about university, inshallah.
Mm-hmm.
But on the point of culture, I think I feel I feel Iran's coming on. SubhanAllah, I feel Iran's coming on because, like I said, my origins, I'm very much like this is um if we're taking, you know, ideologies to their logical endpoint, we're ending up with values of Islam's honor and dignity that it gives to the human being
Mm-hmm.
in every time and in every place, you know, and that's never going to change. So I see, you know, in West Africa, for example, and this is something I kind of had to contend with, you know, in this, you know, we're talking about like our grandmothers and women who came before us in these countries and these parts of the world, and even in the whole world, because modesty was the norm for the majority of
Exactly.
history. Um, you know, the niqab or jilbabs and like outer garments didn't erase their culture. You
Mm-hmm.
know, they would still, and I think culture is a very important thing as well, because you do like people do see it as like, you know, when you start practicing Islam, you erase all of your cultural background and you erase this and you erase that, and like you're just this like copy paste, you know, Quran and Sunnah robot, and people use it as kind of like a derogatory term, you know. But like if you're talking about these women who wear like, okay, they don't show off their they don't adorn themselves outside, so to speak, but they go in, you know, their family lives are so vibrant, you know, the
Mm-hmm.
women's circles are so vibrant, their culture is coming out, their tradition is coming out, the clothes are still preserved, like, you know, the language is still preserved. And I think as a
Exactly.
West African, something even as, you know, even in just my abaya days and stuff, is this idea that like you slowly lose your West African credibility, you know, because oh, you're not gonna dance to Afro beats and you're not gonna, you know
Subhanallah.
about the like this, you know, this culture, that culture thing. And I'm like, guys, let's actually think for a second about what is really culture, you know?
Exactly.
I think like me, for example, I think culture is very important. Like I'm not like fluent and I don't have the accent perfectly, but like Yoruba is something that I do try and preserve. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at myself and sometimes I do feel like clapping back a bit. I'm like, okay, yes, you know the songs and the lyrics to all of these like, I don't know, 21st century artists like Wizkid or whoever, I don't know. And I do you know how to like read a proverb in your own language? Can you
Exactly.
speak your own language? Do you know
Exactly.
your own people's history? You know? And it's like culture has become so superficial. It's all about dressing in the right clothes and like, oh, have you ever been to a Nigerian party? Oh, Nigerian music is so fun. It's so this and that. I'm like, okay, yes, but like we're more than that as a people. And I feel
Exactly.
like that's even part of the kind of, you know, it is a colonial kind of programming in a way to think that it's all this superficial thing. But at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, you forget where you come from. You can't preserve your own language, your own oral tradition, you know, these things which matter a lot more than, you know, trendy songs and like, you know, the 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 memes and like the popular culture of like parties and stuff. I think that that's something that I was like, I feel really strongly about, and I'm very proud as well to like be a Yoruba like Nigerian Muslim Niqabi, because I think that there's so much to say on that point, and there's like it's not, again, this keeps cropping up, but it is not something alien. You know, wherever Islam
Exactly.
is, wherever you find Muslims, you will find Islam and you will find culture alongside it. Yes, Islam will refine parts of the culture that are incompatible, that
Mm-hmm.
are unjust, that are, you know, that don't bring us closer to Allah, but at the same time, you know, Islam is the same religion that puts a focus on lineage. You know,
Exactly.
Islam is the same religion that puts a focus on tarbiyah, you
Mm-hmm.
know, in line with, you know, the norms and values of a society without compromising on, you know, Islam and its values. So I just think that that's something that's very important. And I had to like make sure consciously within myself not to feel like an inferiority or like I'm becoming less Nigerian or, you know, just becoming like a faceless kind of, you know, Muslim. And Muslim is used as a derogatory for someone who has no personality, no culture, no this or that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just one thing. SubhanAllah, we'll leave that
Absolutely.
there.
I totally agree with that. Like a lot of sisters go through that, I think, as well. And I remember, like, when I did become Muslim, there was this Nigerian, the guy that I knew in college, and he was actually a Rastafarian. And
Mm-hmm.
when I told him that, I've become Muslim and stuff, he's like, "Oh, what has the Arab God got for you that that you decided to become a Muslim?" And I just thought, like, what do you mean the Arab God? Like, he's like, it's Allah is the
SubhanAllah.
God of everybody. Do you know what I mean? It's not just about
Yeah.
Arabs. Do you know what I mean? SubhanAllah. And it's like some people come out with these kind of things, and I think, especially like I suppose everybody from different cultures has their own experiences, but obviously being black myself as well, and African Caribbean, it is one of the things, like, you do get that pressure from your community, like, oh, you're going to lose your identity. My mum used to say like, oh, you know, nobody's going to see your hair anymore because you're covering it, and nobody's going to see all the styles that you do and stuff like that. And, you know, it's like part of your identity, and, you know, all these kind of things. Like, it's like they think that you're erasing yourself almost, but it's really not like that. And I think that a lot of sisters, for example, who are Muslim from you know, different cultural backgrounds, you know, can have this similar kind of feeling where they feel, or they're made to feel, that by putting the hijab on itself, they're just erasing their, like, part of their personality and part of who they are, because, you know, you're it's that uniform aspect again, isn't it? When you're going to school and you wear a uniform, it's just like, oh, you know, nobody, you don't stand out anymore, so you're not special. And I think the society that we're raised in now, especially like kind of the Western society or the ideals, it's always trying to tell people, oh, well, you need to do this extremity, or you need to, you need to do something to stand out. If you don't stand out, then you're not special, you're not important, you know. And it's mostly, so much emphasis is placed on the physical element of that, not even what you're doing for your community or for your country or the world. It's specifically, it's always related to looks. You know, you have to dress a certain way, you have to have a certain style that when people look at you, everybody wants to copy you or something like that. You know, it's like this kind of thing. And Muslim sisters do get caught up in that as well, because, you know, even if it's something as simple as a hairstyle, and I'm not saying that, you know, you can't, you know, do certain hairstyles like that you see, like obviously some hairstyles will be halal and some maybe haram or something, but, you know, there's this kind of thing where, you know, sisters, especially as women, we like things that are attractive and beautiful. We want to be attractive and beautiful. So there's that element where you feel that if you're not, you know, if you don't have a particular style or look, it's like, oh, well, you know, I'm not being myself, I'm not being authentic, I'm not being true to myself, or my, you know, living my truth and all this kind of thing. And, you know, I do hear sisters say these kind of things even online, you know, sisters who have like huge followings, for example, and especially when you see that there's sisters who've removed their hijab, you know, they'll say things like that, you know, that they didn't feel that they was living their authentic self. But subhanallah, what does that even mean? If you say you're a Muslim, your authentic self should be that you're a Muslim and you're trying to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do you know what I mean? You're being submissive to the creator of the heavens and the earth. That's what your true authentic self should be. So whatever goes along with that is your true authentic self. And if you come away from that, then you're not being your true authentic self, because you're just following your desires, which, you know, we know that our desires can lead us to the worst places, subhanallah. So if we don't have the guidelines of Islam to, you know, keep us within those, you know, boundaries, you know, to save us from our own selves, really, then, you know, we could end up doing a lot of harm. So onto the sorry, mashallah, it's a really good discussion. Yeah, okay, alhamdulillah. So yeah, do you want to go into you know, your wider experience, you know, in the, you know, community with the niqab, inshallah?
Yeah, so actually ties in perfectly with the point of like being your authentic self. And when you're a Muslim, you know, your authentic self is being a Muslim. And I think, subhanAllah, with everything we do in Islam, you know, subhanAllah, we have such a beautiful religion. Like you just can't get over how much of it just finds you in every single way. Like you're being trained to be patient, you're being trained to be kind, you're being trained to be respectful, and you're being trained to just, you know, everything, you know, your heart, mind, body, soul is all in accordance with Allah's will. And you know, I'm thinking of the hadith, subhanAllah, when Allah loves you, He tells the angels to love you. When the angels love you, He tells mankind to love you.
Yes,
So you're
subhanallah.
never like, that's the key. That's literally the secret. All you need to strive to do is to be loved by Allah. And we know what characteristics Allah loves. We know what behavior Allah loves. So we are putting ourselves through a spiritual training program every single day through our prayers, through our remembrance of Allah, through our actions, and we're slowly but surely trying to become someone who Allah loves. Everything else comes after that.
Exactly.
So that's one thing I found, like the more I become practicing, the more that I feel I have to give, you know? Um, you know how they say, like, you know, when you fast, you like starve the body, not starve in a bad sense, obviously, but like you starve the body and you feed the soul. I
Yes.
feel like when you're starving your nafs, you're feeding every other great thing about you, you know? So I think that in university, that was one thing that I found. And Allah has just made me that way. So no one can really tell me nothing. I'm not gonna lie. SubhanAllah, I just do. If I know that I'm not, you know, violating the rights of anyone, and I'm not violating my responsibilities, my duties to Allah, as a creation of Allah, then I'm fine, So in uni, I was like in the second semester of third year, I was kind of wearing it part-time, and my classmates are pretty used to me by now. The very first day of law school in this place, like, the university has a certain reputation, and we were having this lecture by a very imposing man, who was this, law professor with years of experience. And I remember he was asking the very first day of law school, he was like, where do our morals come from? What
Mm.
makes right and what makes wrong? And, that wasn't going to really set the tone for the rest of our law school days, but it was just this, this moral and intellectual exercise. And I remember the first day of the first semester ever with these people I had never met before, subhanAllah, he was like, okay, where do our morals come from? And I like answered one of his questions, and I was like, basically, morals need to have these values, that values. And I didn't have exactly the language. I was still learning. I am still learning, alhamdulillah, to like have the language to present Islam, in these kind of settings.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll get actually on that point, the more I learned throughout my college days, the more anytime we had to write an essay or an assignment on a legal topic, I would always bring Islam in somehow. And the funniest thing is reasoning for why I think that a certain thing would be right or wrong in a society. Every single time I would get like a very high mark, and the professors would be like, this is such an interesting perspective,
Mm-hmm.
this is a really interesting moral lens, and very interesting social view, and et cetera, et cetera. But that's not the point. I think that it's just a side note to note that Islam, it's never, it is the truest and most pure way, and you can really never go wrong. And I think you can recognize the truth in very different circumstances when you see it. But that's a complete tangent, subhanAllah. Anyway, I was very much allowed, like, opinionated in the right sense. Like, I wasn't known for the wrong reasons, but everyone was like, okay, there's this girl in a veil. I mean, by veil, I mean hijab at that sense, because I wasn't wearing a niqab then. They were like, okay, this black girl in hijab has a lot to say, and she can say it very well, and she's not exactly scared of anyone. And that was what people knew me for till the very day that I finished,
Mm-hmm.
alhamdulillah,
Alhamdulillah.
for better or for worse. So it was like, I would, if I believed something, I would defend it, and you couldn't really sway me in that sense. So people kind of knew that, like, she knew what she was about, and if they ever asked me about something, they would get an answer that was straightforward and was also meaningful. So no one really called me out on it. I think I was the only hijabi in my whole law set, and I was already comfortable with that. But I never really thought about it at the same time, because in my mind, I was like, I go to my lectures, and then my actual, in terms of my social life at university, it was all really surrounded by the Muslim Students Association. That was my people. Like, I wouldn't go anywhere else to socialize, so I wouldn't have to encounter any kind of like, oh, why are you not doing this? Why are you not doing that? Like, I didn't have to do any like really basic stuff like, oh, this is why Muslims don't drink, or
Mm.
that kind of thing. Alhamdulillah. And I think people, it was genuinely a non-issue. And I think people say, I kind of, when I talk about my experience with niqab in the wider world, I don't want to simplify it and be like, oh, it's sunshine and roses, because I am aware that I have this kind of like shield of like confidence that means that people kind of know not to mess with me.
Yeah.
Or I also have this, I'm a very like naive slash optimistic person. So I don't really like read into, oh, this is how he looked at me. This is what she,
Yes. Yes.
this kind of thing. I think all of it just kind of bounces off me. Um, but yeah, I think more than anything is that like I never lost my voice. I never just became like a hidden figure, and I think that that's very important. I guess because maybe it's the university space, and I guess nowadays anything and everything goes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, I was like, there's people who are dressed a lot stranger than me out here,
Exactly.
not to get
SubhanAllah,
into the
can you
specifics, but
imagine? Like,
like
I think,
subhanAllah, I'm like, I'm not the one who should feel embarrassed right now.
like,
Like
literally, can you
like
imagine, like,
subhanAllah.
in this time that we live in, like, this is one of the
Yeah,
things I think for a lot of young sisters now, and even brothers as well, when it comes to like maybe growing their beard or something like that. SubhanAllah, if you are really stuck on how you appear to people, like, literally is, I literally think it's completely unacceptable, because the times that we're living in now, it's just like that cannot be an excuse. It cannot be a valid excuse anymore. It
that's
just
so
can't
true,
be.
subhanAllah. No, I think that's so true. I think, like, without going into the specifics about, certain groups and ideologies and stuff, but people really are just dressing any type of way, whether it's like, misgendered clothing or like
Mhm.
the lack of clothing or, all of these things that people are like, it's fluid, it doesn't matter, it's all about self-expression or just trying to be as outrageous or as outlandish as possible. I'm not the one who is, abiding by Allah's rules who's going to feel weird about it. Let's just be real. So
Mhm.
I think university days, alhamdulillah, like I just kind of carried on as regular. There's only like really tiny things that are almost laughable. Like sometimes I'd speak up in a lecture hall and like people wouldn't know where the voice was coming from,
Mhm.
subhanAllah. So that's like, just stuff like that was like, really, really tiny things. And like it didn't affect my relationship with like my fellow students, with my professors, you know.
Alhamdulillah.
I'd get compliments like, oh, I like the color of the veil and this and that. And I'm like,
Mhm.
really, really nice stuff, alhamdulillah. And like you said, like it is a really interesting starting point for dawah. But at the same time, if you're starting out, if someone is starting out wearing niqab, you know, you're kind of, it can be tempting to want to keep a low profile and not attract attention because
Yes.
attention means potential criticism or
Mhm.
this and that. But like, you never know what's in people's hearts, to be honest. And at the end of the day, kind of hiding away or, living in fear is not the goal. If we're doing this thing to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or, to become closer to Him, or, even if it's just a matter of personal comfort, because people wear it for different reasons, like we can't, that shouldn't be something that kind of pulls us back and makes us stop contributing to society in beneficial ways. So I suppose that's it from like the college perspective. And I think another way in which my dua was answered, in terms of the niqab being made easy for me is actually a lot of Yoruba Nigerian Muslims here in Ireland. Like I started getting involved in different communities and they would all be like they would all have a really great like admiration and appreciation for it. And I
Alhamdulillah.
thought that was really like it's nice to know that not everyone, would think, oh, it's not necessary, this and that. Like people be like, oh, Allah Mabarak, they would just have a kind of respect for it, which I thought was really nice. And something that I also thought was really nice was then when my mom started hearing it and she started seeing that like, her worries about people perceiving her daughter as an extremist or
Mhm.
something, those weren't valid because people actually do admire it. And, I've had like random instances of non-Muslims be like, oh my gosh, you look really beautiful, you look really elegant. And I'm like, subhanAllah, like
Alhamdulillah.
there's nothing to be scared of. And I think one thing, again, alhamdulillah, I'm a very confident person. But part of that comes from the fact that I am a creation of Allah living on Allah's earth. And no one can
Alhamdulillah.
stop me from worshiping Allah on Allah's earth that He created. Like, and everyone else is
Exactly.
just a
Subhanallah.
creation, just like
Mhm.
me. So there's no real like inferiority complex. I'm not scared of anyone really because I'm only scared of Allah. And in terms of like, will I get this job? Won't I get this job? What are my
Mhm.
career prospects looking like? All of it is in the hands of Allah. I'm doing my best. I'm putting my best foot forward at all times. I'm not compromising on my own values. So like there's literally nothing left for me to do. SubhanAllah, it's all in Allah's hands. And these ideas of like, oh, if I weren't wearing this or if only I looked like that, this would happen. I think a big, big thing that a lot of Muslims need to remind themselves of on the daily is the qadr of Allah.
Exactly.
Um, this idea that like if you weren't doing this, if you weren't doing that, or if only, like the Prophet ﷺ told us not to say if only, that is all just it's all delusion. It's all you trying to like
Exactly.
comfort yourself or convince yourself of one thing or another when at the end of the day, like I said, if you want to say you were discriminated against because of niqab, maybe it was because of hijab. Maybe they just don't like black people. Maybe they just don't, if it was a point of discrimination. And at the same time, if you were gonna get the job, if you were gonna, if whatever was gonna happen, it was because of Allah. It wasn't because of this, it wasn't because of that. And I feel like people only use it as a cop out, as an excuse.
Mhm.
It's only when something didn't go in their favor, or maybe something they're predicting something won't go in their favor, like, oh, it will be because of the niqab. Like, where are we drawing this conclusion from?
Exactly. We make a lot of assumptions through because
We
we
really
have like
do.
fear within ourselves, and these kind of anxieties, which, sometimes they might have some basis, but a lot of the time they
Hmm.
just don't. We're just making these assumptions because everybody's experiences can be different. And obviously, some sisters have been abused for wearing the car, but there's a lot of
Truly,
sisters
yeah.
have been abused for wearing the hijab. So if you're going from hijab to niqab and they're going to use abuse as an excuse to not wear it, then it could be that it's quite uncalled for because you could have been abused in your hijab, and if you
Mm,
haven't, then then that's that. Then other sisters who have been abused with their hijab on, like, what do you say to them? Are you going to tell them, oh, don't wear it? Do you know what I mean? Like,
subhanAllah,
and
and I
and and
think,
and as well, just like you mentioned, being a woman of color as well, you can be
mhm,
abused just for being a woman of color. You could be just abused just because of the fact that you're a woman, just because
exactly,
you're
yeah.
just different from
SubhanAllah.
somebody, like, that, who decides they want to abuse you. You could be abused just because somebody's having a bad day. There's so
Exactly,
many
subhanAllah.
reasons, like, subhanallah.
I think definitely, subhanAllah, I think that's so true. And I think there's an element of necessary precaution, especially, okay, if you know the area you live in is unsafe or that sort of thing. Like there is an element of necessary precaution, but at the same time, just in general, like as a Muslim, we shouldn't live in fear in any sense, you know. We should have trust in Allah and we should be confident in our identities. And it's not, you know, it's easier said than done, you know, this doesn't happen overnight for many
Hmm.
people. I guess I'm like I'm a bit of a freak in that sense because it just does like I am immune to these things in some regards. But I know well it does take a lot of inner work and a lot of like, you know, really getting to grips with reality, you know,
Hmm.
and reality is every day is unpredictable. Every second you step out your door is unpredictable, whether you're Muslim, non-Muslim, whether you wear hijab, wear niqab, or don't wear either. So, you know, subhanAllah, it's all in the hands of Allah. So I think we should not and this idea of like, oh, I'm gonna put this off. And we really need to work, all of us collectively, on our trust in Allah and our you know, our steadfastness and our bravery as well, especially considering as Muslims, the legacy, the Sahaba.
Yeah, definitely, subhanallah. Have you heard of, or have you met any
Mhm.
sisters who've been forced into wearing the niqab, or the opposite, which is not being allowed to wear it at all?
Um, I don't know of either case,
Mm-hmm.
but I do know sisters who are not allowed, like when I say not allowed, I mean strongly discouraged against wearing it.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay, alhamdulillah. And would you say, in your experience,
That,
that wearing the niqab, you've had like a different experience than when you was wearing the hijab, for example? Or do you think that people who wear the niqab, sisters who are wearing it, are getting treated differently than sisters who wear the hijab in Muslim or non-Muslim communities? I think we've covered that a little bit, but
um,
like, what's your perspective on
yeah,
that? Have you seen any kind of clear kind of, maybe discriminatory, or the differences that you think are notable?
I think perhaps if you're encountering people who are a bit wary of you as a hijabi, it's easy to just give a smile
Hmm.
and, you know, kind of disarm them in that sense and kind of be like, okay, you know, I'm not a threat if they are actually scared of you. But I think nowadays it's not really genuine fear. It's just like curiosity
Yeah.
about the other. But I think with the niqab that is a little bit harder. Like you can smile with your eyes, but you know that is slightly different, I guess. So it's not like you have to be more intentional about your public interactions when you're like
Yes.
walking down the street or like in the shop. But like all of that is part of the struggle, the jihad of being a better Muslim and being having a better, you know, better character. And as for the Muslim community, I think there's a funny assumption that all niqabis are very pious, very well learned, and you know, very knowledgeable, and you know, I think that that's bit of a jump to
Hmm.
subhanallah. Like
Definitely.
you know, just because something's been made easy for someone in one aspect, you know, doesn't mean that they're all of a sudden, you know, pious and perfect, you know. Some people find modesty easy, some people find it easy to fast voluntarily, some people find it easy to give loads of charity. But at the end of the day, we're all still like, you know, working on ourselves in different ways where we all know we fall short. Like we all know inside ourselves. So I think it's funny. Um, but also I think that it's a good motivation when wearing the niqab, if people start to see you a certain way, it's not that you want to become really pious and really knowledgeable to like be what they think you are, but at the same
Exactly.
time, it's
It's
like
not for
this
showing off, is it?
aura of yeah, yeah. But at the same time, it is a positive motivation.
Yes.
Um, where it's like, okay, let me like the dua, I think it's of Umar radiallahu anhu, where it's like asking Allah to make me better than they think of me and
Yeah.
forgive me for what they don't know about me.
Hmm.
So it's the whole make me better than they think of me part where it's always like you're constantly striving to be better, do better, learn more, give more.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, mashallah. So what kind of advice would you give to sisters who, like yourself, have been through, have had, the experience that you've had with your niqab and even hijab and everything. What advice would you give to other sisters like yourself who are around your age or younger who are wanting to wear the niqab, but, and contemplating it? And, because they want to go
Um,
to university, for example, like this is one of the
mhm.
biggest things that I think stops a lot of young sisters from contemplating putting the niqab on for university because they think that, oh, it's not going to be allowed or something. And I'm sure that maybe some places have these rules still, even though
Mm.
after COVID it doesn't really make any sense. But
Mhm.
yeah, what would what would you give them as advice?
Um, I think on a practical level, mm, particularly with the university point, I think university, if you're in the stage of going from like secondary school or high school to university, it's a whole new world, I must say. And university is a big, big place, and people are experiencing lots of freedom for the first time. So, with all due respect, sisters should know that like they're not really the center of attention. People don't really think that much about you, look at you that much, care about you. Everyone's, trying to figure out themselves, trying to get assignments done. And I think it's university, like I said, is a very good time and place to, develop your own personal identity and Islamic identity and, get involved with the right crowd. I think having a positive circle of friends is like the most important thing. Who can encourage you, who can remind you of your own values. I think, the sister who sewed the niqab for me by hand is not a niqabi herself, but
Mm,
she's someone who's like, she's the kind of friend who's like, if someone wants to do good, I'm going to help them achieve that. And having friends
alhamdulillah,
like that is what's most important.
absolutely.
Alhamdulillah. Um, I think on a practical level, style matters and quality matters.
Hmm.
Nowadays, when we talk about niqab, when we talk about style, we may have like a kind of like second a second thought about it because nowadays it is kind of becoming a symbol of something, and I don't really know what that thing is, but it's becoming trendy, it's becoming cute somehow, which is a great thing, alhamdulillah. But when I say style, I mean style within like, the point of the niqab, the point of the hijab is like, not to be this, flashy symbol or, we all know the conditions of the hijab and it's meant to be a thing of modesty.
Exactly. It's
So
not just showing off.
exactly. I'd say style matters and quality matters. Getting yourself good quality niqabs, finding a style that suits you, whether that's the half niqab, whether that's like a three-layer niqab, and finding good quality material because, if you're trying to feel good about yourself, how we were talking about the practical elements of like,
Exactly.
it's a new like lifestyle choice, all this fabric, all this stuff like that,
Hmm.
it doesn't help if you feel frumpy, if
Yes,
you're wearing
yes.
this like itchy material
Yeah,
and you can't
or
breathe and it's
uncomfortable.
just
Yeah, you need
yeah,
something that's going to be practical and comfortable for you personally.
exactly.
That's one of the benefits of the different having the different styles. And I
Hmm.
think just now, especially like coming back to what I said earlier about how everything is focused on looks and things like that. There's such a fine line now between us being trying to be encouraging to others to wear the niqab or wear the hijab correctly versus just doing it because, oh, this is so-called modest fashion now. So it just becomes this thing where so it's like how many, like for example, sometimes like for me, like I was never really into the I never really got into the kind of the hijab tutorial thing online, when I was,
Hmm.
going through my journey like with hijab and everything. And personally, I'm not criticizing people who are interested in that because I know everybody gets encouragement in different ways. But for me, I just thought to myself, well, I just put the hijab on and that's it. It's like I just wrap it around my head. It was just like a simple something. It wasn't like once I knew that I was fulfilling the criteria that I needed to, I didn't think, oh, well, I want a different style to do because for me, I was already doing what, what fit me, what was practical to me. So I think that sisters need to try to be aware of that as well. If you manage to find a
Hmm.
style, of a correct hijab, which is practical for you, you're fulfilling the criteria, you know, then you should stop looking for something else. Do you know what I mean? Like I think we need to try to evaluate why why are we
Yeah.
buying this new whatever it is? Do you know what I mean? Like, what's the purposes
No, so
behind it? Because
true.
it's about having the correct intentions as well, so
Mm-hmm.
and I think as well, like, even on that note as well, as women, we can get carried away with shopping. Do you know what I mean? And just buying things for the sake of buying them, not
Oh,
because we actually need
absolutely.
it. And
Yeah,
and if you
I
know that
fully
you
agree.
have a lot of jilbabs, for example, in your wardrobe, like, are you actually wearing all of those? Do you need to have all of those jilbabs? Because there's sisters who maybe would like to wear one and they can't actually afford it. So maybe try to think about what you could do to, empty your wardrobe if they're still in good condition, obviously, try to pass them
Mm-hmm.
on to other sisters who, would like to be able to wear something like that, to have, to have a proper, and this is from the Sunnah as well, like, even like, when we think about the Eid itself, the Prophet ﷺ,
Mm-hmm.
he told the sisters that if one of your sisters doesn't have jilbab, let them borrow from another, so it's something you would get rewarded for, obviously. So think about these kind of things. If you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed you, financially, that you can change your jilbabs every year or whatever, make sure you try to be conscious about what you're going to do with them. And maybe it could be a means of sadaqah, like giving them away. I know some sisters, maybe you might think to sell them on, but I personally, I would consider just giving them as a sadaqah charity, because there's many sisters who really just can't afford this at all. um and then you're doing your bit, like, at least to help others who don't have those things. And it's just being more conscious as well, as I said, your intentions as to
Mm-hmm.
why you're dressing a certain way, because we could show off with anything. We know when it comes to the religion, like, showing off during your salah, for example, showing off
Mm-hmm.
even by telling people that you're fasting, sunnah fast, things like that. There can be
Yeah.
so many ways that shaitan can, like, creep in and, like, give us this kind of superiority complex, almost because we feel that we're doing something that nobody else is doing, or we're doing it better than somebody else. But it has to be for the sake of Allah, and we don't know which of our deeds is going to be accepted, so we have to keep purifying our intentions. Yeah,
That's
inshallah.
true, subhanAllah. That's so, so true. I think that on the point of like, it's so funny that like I'm speaking for myself personally, like from being the student who had no money who had to save up to buy her first 25 pound jilbab, and who actually got her first jilbab, donated, given by a friend, to now, okay, now I'm dressing like this. Now I need like inspiration. I need to find my style. I need this and that. So then, I'm not on social media anymore, just because, for personal reasons. But, this reason was one of them. Because I remember I would, something that I started doing for the sake of Allah, something I started doing to like, become closer to Allah, and, be more confident in myself, etc., etc. Now it's this thing of like, oh, I see this sister who's saying I need to buy a new khimar this week, and now a new jilbab. And if I don't have at least five, color jilbabs, then what am I going to do? And, it really does, you get trapped into it so easily. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that it's very important, like you said, it's, we can get carried away in any, we can get carried away by shaitan in any act of worship that we're doing. Um, and Islam as a whole, we're not meant to be extravagant. We're not meant to be consumerists. There's nothing wrong with looking nice, and there's nothing wrong with, developing your style. And if you can afford things, alhamdulillah, that's great. But also, keeping your nafs in check, because if it just becomes a thing of like, I need this, I need that, I need this, um, it doesn't really get you anywhere, and you can actually, you lose the purity of intention that you had at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say that for myself. And I just remember at some point I was like, I need to shut out all the noise. Yes, it was nice to see like a Niqabi YouTuber, just talking and, sharing life and stuff on YouTube. But if it's at the point where I'm just being bombarded with, sisters telling me I need to buy this, and, the pressure to get different things, it's just, it takes away from the actual meaning. I think as well, like you said about in terms of advice, it's very good to take steps. It's very good to start part-time and stuff. And it's very difficult to say this, because I know even for myself, like, I would when I started wearing the niqab in Spain, like I remember I'd have like some abayas and they came with belts, and I'd still tie the belt on the abaya, which is giving like a very like a figure revealing shape kind of.
Yes.
So, it did take like I wasn't, who knows where I was at that time, like, Allah knows best, and may Allah forgive me. But you don't want to tell a sister, oh, if you can't wear it perfectly, don't try at all. But at the same time, one thing that I really like, this verse that I've been thinking about lately, that it really reflects on my niqab journey, is that like it's in Surah Al-Mudaththir, I believe. كل نفس على نفس what's it? بل الإنسان على نفسه بصيرة ولو
Mm-hmm.
ألقى مآذيره.
Mm-hmm.
So, humans, man is conscious. Everyone knows their own soul, even if they make excuses. And I think that's just such a, subhanAllah, it is
That's
talking about the Day of
Surah
Judgment, but I think
Al-Qiyamah,
the
I
principle,
think.
Jazakallah khair, sister, but I think that principle is just like, keep it real with yourself. I think that again, part of it is shutting out the noise, because we can be told, oh, hijab is a journey, everyone this, everyone that, and then the more influences you see of like, oh, add a touch of makeup, add a bit of flair, tie a belt here, wear this, it can just seep into your subconscious, and then before you realize it, you are compromising on the values of the hijab. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's important to keep it real with yourself. Yes, okay, you may struggle, and it's hard. Like, you don't want to tell a sister wear it perfectly or take it off, but at the same time, it's a personal thing. You know, if a sister is speaking to herself personally, it's like, what do I need to do to get close to Allah? Am I being real with myself? Is what I'm doing correct, kind of thing? If you know that you're meant to be taking the next step in your journey regarding modesty and you're not, you have to, even if you're making excuses, truly inside yourself where you're trying to go. And you have to, constantly renew that, and constantly, fight against that. And it doesn't stop. I was actually thinking about coming on this podcast, and I was like, what do I know? I've only been wearing it for like a year or two, subhanAllah. But
Alhamdulillah.
it's
May Allah keep you
you know,
steadfast. I mean,
I mean, but I think it's not about you know, reaching the end point of a journey. I think whether it's about niqab or whether it's about any act of, getting closer to Allah, it's about the journey, about the
exactly.
sacrifice, about keeping it real with yourself. I remember I saw a video one time about someone speaking about his journey to eating halal. And that's not something that people talk about as a journey. But
Exactly.
at the end of the day, it's still like, it's something to be noted. It's something that is important. It's still a step, on the journey to get closer to Allah. So I think that we shouldn't undermine any good deed, especially like in this instance, if you're wearing it part-time, if you can only wear it sometimes, like, don't feel discouraged, and just try and gain your own confidence. Again, back to the positive circle of friends. And you also, it's a time where you have to be sure of who you are,
Mm-hmm.
and like still have a role to play in society. And that doesn't mean you have to be an exhibitionist and like, you know, within, you step outside of your comfort zone or compromise on your modesty or your haya, but at the same time you still have a role to play. Don't just like sink into the
Exactly. SubhanAllah. Finally, inshallah, to answer, it's for the last question, I'll ask you, what does the niqab mean to you, sister?
um I think to me it means privacy
Mm-hmm.
and positive sacrifice for the sake of Allah. I mean, all sacrifices for the sake of Allah are positive,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just, we really can't forget that subhanallah, Allah through his kindness and through his wisdom has never given us something in the religion that isn't good for us in this life and the next.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's just like the rewards, like the benefits of it in my life personally are just like, you know, unimaginable, alhamdulillah. So that's what it means to me. And I think as well, it means like setting higher standards for myself, you know. Um, a big motivation for me was, if I look a certain way, I have to just keep myself in check. People find
Yeah.
this all the time when they wear
Mm-hmm.
hijab, abaya, niqab, anything. It's like, I can't just be seen anywhere in any old place, talking to any
Mm-hmm.
old person, acting or talking in a certain manner. I have an image of Islam to uphold. I'm representing Islam. And for me, that was a really, really big thing. Like, I needed a reminder at all times of who I am as a Muslim and what I'm representing. And, again, to stop making excuses for myself for, oh, this small thing or that small thing. It's like, no, this is how the world sees you. This is how you're dressed. This is what you're representing and presenting. So I think that's what niqab means to me as well. It's a very, very beautiful reminder. And then, people do see you a certain way. So then you are also motivated to make your inner, your heart, work on your heart and
Mm-hmm.
make your appear the match. if it's an image of piety, make it match. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If people think that you're so pious, it's not about what they think, but it's about actually bringing yourself to that level. So that's something that
Yes.
I think is really beautiful about the niqab for me. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Barakallahu feekum, sister. It's been a real pleasure talking to you today. And Jazakallah khair for giving so much of your time. Alhamdulillah. I'm sure that a lot of our younger sisters will be able to definitely benefit and relate because, you know, they're going through the same and similar experiences with parents or when it comes to college and university. You know, as I said, I do get these questions from young sisters often. So alhamdulillah, it is nice to talk to a young sister, even though, you know, as you said, it's not about how long you've been wearing it because it's not an end goal. It's about the journey. So alhamdulillah, I think this definitely is beneficial for especially our younger sisters, inshallah.
Barakallah fiki, sister. Thanks so much for having me on.
Rafiq and barakallah, sister. Take care and have a blessed day, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So have a nice day too.